The German Confederation and the Restoration Order. The Congress of Vienna, 1814 to 1815, established a new European order based on the principles of legitimacy, balance of power, and conservative restoration following the revolutionary and Napoleonic upheavals. For German territories, the Congress created the German Confederation, Deutscher Bund, a loose association of 39 sovereign states designed to maintain German unity while preserving princely sovereignty and Austrian leadership within the German system. The Confederation's structure reflected the complex balance between unity and particularism that characterized German political development. The Federal Diet, Bundestag meeting in Frankfurt provided a forum for diplomatic coordination while carefully limiting federal authority to matters of mutual defense and the maintenance of internal order. The Confederation's fundamental weakness lay in its inability to act decisively on issues requiring unanimous consent, particularly regarding constitutional reform, economic integration, or military modernization. Austrian leadership under Prince Metternich established the ideological framework for the Restoration period through the Holy Alliance and the Concert of Europe. Metternich's system aimed to prevent revolutionary movements through international cooperation and internal surveillance. The Carlsbad Decrees, 1819, promulgated following the assassination of the conservative playwright August von Kotzebue by the student Karl Ludwig Sand, established press censorship, university surveillance, and political repression that characterized the Restoration period. The constitutional movements in southern German states, including Baden, Württemberg, and Bavaria, represented attempts to balance monarchical authority with liberal participation. These constitutions, while limited in scope, established precedents for representative government and civil liberties that would influence subsequent German political development. The constitutional experiments also created experienced liberal politicians who would play crucial roles in the revolutions of 1848. The Zollverein, customs union, initiated by Prussia in 1834, represented the most successful attempt at German integration during the Confederation period. The gradual expansion of the customs union to include most German states created a common market that facilitated economic development while establishing Prussian leadership in German economic affairs. The Zollverein's success demonstrated the possibility of German unity through practical cooperation rather than political revolution. Industrialization and social change. The Industrial Revolution reached German territories gradually during the first half of the 19th century, accelerating dramatically after 1840 and transforming economic structures, social relationships, and political possibilities. The development of steam power, railroad networks, and factory production created new forms of wealth and poverty, while challenging traditional social hierarchies and economic relationships. The railroad boom of the 1840s and 1850s provided the infrastructure for economic integration and industrial development. The completion of major rail lines connecting Berlin to Cologne, Hamburg, and other commercial centers facilitated the movement of goods, people, and ideas across political boundaries. Railroad construction also stimulated heavy industry, particularly iron and steel production, while creating new forms of investment and corporate organization. The emergence of industrial capitalism created distinct social classes whose interests often conflicted with traditional political structures. The industrial bourgeoisie accumulated wealth and political influence that challenged aristocratic dominance, while the growing working class experienced the harsh realities of factory labor, urban overcrowding, and economic insecurity. The development of industrial cities like Essen, Dortmund, and Düsseldorf created new social environments characterized by class segregation and cultural tensions. Agricultural transformation paralleled industrial development, with the completion of peasant emancipation and the rationalization of farming methods increasing productivity while displacing rural populations. The enclosure of common lands, the consolidation of holdings, and the introduction of scientific agriculture created a more efficient agricultural system while generating surplus labor for industrial employment. The rural-urban migration that resulted from these changes created the demographic foundation for industrial expansion. The emergence of working-class consciousness and organization represented a fundamental challenge to existing political and social arrangements. Early workers' associations, mutual aid societies, and craft guilds evolved into more sophisticated forms of labor organization. The influence of socialist ideas, particularly those of Karl Marx and Ferdinand Lassalle, provided intellectual frameworks for understanding industrial capitalism's social consequences and organizing opposition to its inequities. The Revolution of 1848 and its aftermath. The revolutionary wave that swept across Europe in 1848 found particularly fertile ground in German territories, where economic distress, political frustration, and nationalist aspirations converged to challenge the Restoration order. The February Revolution in Paris provided the spark, but German revolutionary movements reflected distinctly German concerns about constitutional government, national unity, and social reform. The March Revolution in Berlin forced King Frederick William IV to accept constitutional limitations on royal authority and to support German unification efforts. Similar movements in Vienna led to Metternich's resignation and the convening of constituent assemblies in both Austria and Prussia. The revolutionary enthusiasm of March 1848 seemed to promise fundamental changes in German political structure and the realization of liberal and nationalist aspirations. The Frankfurt Parliament, elected through the first democratic elections in German history, represented the most ambitious attempt to create German unity through constitutional means. The Assembly's debates over the form of German government, the extent of German territory, and the relationship between unity and freedom revealed fundamental tensions within the liberal movement. The distinction between Greater German, Grossdeutsch, and Lesser German, Kleindeutsch, solutions reflected not only practical political considerations, but fundamental questions about German identity and European integration. The Frankfurt Constitution, completed in March 1849, represented a sophisticated attempt to balance democratic participation with effective government. The document's provisions for civil liberties, federal structure, and constitutional monarchy reflected liberal political theory while attempting to accommodate German particularism. However, the Constitution's rejection by Frederick William IV and other German rulers demonstrated the limitations of constitutional idealism when confronted with entrenched political interests. The revolution's failure resulted from multiple factors, including the division between moderate and radical liberals, the recovery of conservative forces, and the fundamental weakness of revolutionary organization. The Prussian rejection of the imperial crown offered by the Frankfurt Parliament symbolized the defeat of liberal nationalism and the reassertion of traditional authority. The subsequent period of reaction saw the systematic dismantling of constitutional gains and the restoration of conservative political control. Prussian hegemony and German unification. The failure of liberal nationalism in 1848 created opportunities for alternative approaches to German unification based on Prussian power and conservative leadership. Otto von Bismarck's appointment as Prussian minister-president in 1862 marked the beginning of a systematic campaign to achieve German unity through blood and iron rather than parliamentary debate and constitutional negotiation. Bismarck's strategy relied on the careful manipulation of European diplomacy to isolate potential opponents while creating circumstances favorable to Prussian expansion. The Danish War, 1864, fought in cooperation with Austria, demonstrated the possibility of German military cooperation while securing the duchies of Schleswig-Holstein for German control. The subsequent dispute over the administration of these territories provided the pretext for the Austro-Prussian War, 1866. The 7 Weeks' War, 1866, eliminated Austrian influence from German affairs and demonstrated the superiority of Prussian military organization and technology. The decisive victory at Königgrätz, Sadova, resulted from innovations in military technology, particularly the needle gun, and superior strategic planning by Helmuth von Moltke. The war's outcome dissolved the German Confederation and created the North German Confederation under Prussian leadership. The North German Confederation represented a compromise between Prussian hegemony and German particularism that preserved state sovereignty while creating effective federal institutions. The Confederation's constitution, largely Bismarck's creation, established a federal structure with a strong executive, the Prussian king as federal president, and a democratically elected parliament, Reichstag, with limited powers. This system balanced democratic participation with authoritarian control in ways that would characterize the later German Empire. The Franco-Prussian War, 1870–1871, completed the unification process by bringing the southern German states into the federal system and creating a common German identity through shared military victory. The war's origins in disputes over the Spanish succession provided Bismarck with the opportunity to present Prussia as defending German honor against French aggression. The Ems Dispatch, skillfully edited by Bismarck to appear more provocative than the original precipitated French declarations of war that unified German public opinion behind Prussia. The military campaign demonstrated the superiority of German military organization, strategic planning, and technological innovation. The encirclement and capture of Napoleon III at Sedan, followed by the siege of Paris and the proclamation of the German Empire at Versailles, represented the culmination of Prussian hegemony and the achievement of German unity under conservative leadership. The war's outcome established Germany as the dominant power in continental Europe while creating lasting Franco-German antagonism. The German Empire, structure and development. The proclamation of the German Empire on January 18, 1871, in the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, represented the culmination of centuries of German political fragmentation and the beginning of a new era in European politics. The empire's federal structure preserved the sovereignty of constituent states while creating effective central institutions capable of coordinating policy across German territories. The Imperial Constitution of 1871 established a complex federal system that balanced Prussian hegemony with the autonomy of other German states. Prussia's dominance was ensured through its control of the presidency, Kaiser, the chancellorship, and a blocking minority in the Federal Council, Bundesrat. However, the democratic election of the Imperial Parliament, Reichstag, through universal male suffrage, provided a forum for popular participation and political debate that often challenged government policies. Bismarck's system of government relied on his unique position as both Prussian minister-president and imperial chancellor, allowing him to coordinate policy between state and federal levels. His political strategy involved the careful manipulation of competing interests, liberal, conservative, Catholic, and socialist, to maintain governmental stability while preventing the emergence of unified opposition. The Iron Chancellor's diplomatic genius maintained European peace while consolidating German power through alliance systems and colonial expansion. The Kulturkampf, 1871 to 1887, represented Bismarck's most serious domestic political challenge, as his attempt to subordinate the Catholic Church to state authority provoked massive resistance from German Catholics. The conflict over civil marriage, educational control, and clerical appointments created a powerful Catholic political movement through the Center Party, while demonstrating the limits of state power in religious affairs. The eventual resolution of the Kulturkampf required significant compromises that enhanced Catholic political influence within the empire. Economic development during the Empire period transformed Germany into Europe's leading industrial power. The completion of German unification eliminated internal trade barriers and created a large domestic market that facilitated industrial expansion. The development of heavy industry, chemical production, and electrical engineering established German technological leadership while creating new forms of corporate organization and labor relations. The social consequences of rapid industrialization created political challenges that tested the empire's stability. The emergence of a large industrial working class, concentrated in cities like Berlin, Hamburg, and the Ruhr region, provided the social foundation for the Social Democratic Party's growth. Despite the anti-socialist laws, 1878 to 1890, the SPD became the largest party in the Reichstag by 1912, demonstrating the political awakening of the German working class. Wilhelmina Germany and the path to war. Kaiser Wilhelm II's accession in 1888 and Bismarck's dismissal in 1890 marked the beginning of a new era in German politics characterized by personal rule, aggressive nationalism, and the abandonment of Bismarck's cautious diplomatic system. The young Kaiser's belief in divine right monarchy and Germany's world mission, Weltmission, created tensions with parliamentary government and peaceful international relations. The new course in foreign policy abandoned Bismarck's alliance system in favor of a more aggressive pursuit of German interests. The non-renewal of the reinsurance treaty with Russia, the naval rivalry with Britain through Admiral Tirpitz's fleet program, and the pursuit of world policy, Weltpolitik, through colonial expansion and diplomatic intervention created international tensions that ultimately led to the First World War. German colonial expansion in Africa, the Pacific, and China reflected the empire's growing economic power and international ambitions. However, Germany's late entry into the colonial scramble resulted in the acquisition of territories that were economically marginal, while creating diplomatic conflicts with established colonial powers. The colonial experience also contributed to the development of racial theories and imperial ideologies that would have tragic consequences in the 20th century. The domestic political system became increasingly polarized as traditional conservative forces confronted the growing influence of social democracy, Catholic political organization, and ethnic minorities. The failure to democratize the Prussian three-class voting system, the persistence of military influence in civilian affairs, and the Kaiser's erratic interventions in politics created governmental instability that undermined effective policymaking. The July crisis of 1914 demonstrated the bankruptcy of Wilhelmine diplomacy and the disastrous consequences of Germany's international isolation. The blank check offered to Austria-Hungary following the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand reflected the German leadership's belief that a short, victorious war would solve both domestic and international problems. The Schlieffen Plan's failure and the development of trench warfare on the Western Front created a military stalemate that would consume German society's resources and ultimately destroy the empire. The First World War and imperial collapse. Germany's entry into the First World War represented the culmination of the tensions and contradictions that had been building within the Wilhelmine system. The initial enthusiasm for war reflected in the Burgfrieden, civic peace, that united all political parties behind the war effort, soon gave way to disillusionment as the conflict developed into a prolonged struggle of attrition that strained German society to its breaking point. The failure of the Schlieffen Plan and the development of two-front warfare created military challenges that German resources could not sustain indefinitely. The naval blockade imposed by the British fleet gradually strangled German trade and created severe shortages of food and raw materials. The turnip winter of 1916 to 1917 demonstrated the war's impact on civilian populations and contributed to growing war weariness and political opposition. The military leadership's assumption of virtual dictatorial power under the Third Supreme Command of Hindenburg and Ludendorff represented the militarization of German politics and the subordination of civilian authority to military necessity. The introduction of unrestricted submarine warfare and the Zimmermann Telegram's proposal for a German-Mexican alliance brought the United States into the war, ultimately ensuring Germany's defeat. The political consequences of military failure included the gradual democratization of the German political system as the military leadership sought to transfer responsibility for defeat to civilian politicians. The parliamentary reforms of October 1918, which made the Chancellor responsible to the Reichstag rather than the Kaiser, represented the constitutional changes that conservatives had resisted for decades. The November Revolution of 1918 began with naval mutinies in Kiel, and spread rapidly across Germany as workers' and soldiers' councils seized power in major cities. The Kaiser's abdication and flight to Holland marked the end of the Hohenzollern monarchy and the beginning of Germany's first experiment with democratic government. The armistice signed on November 11, 1918, ended the fighting, but left Germany facing the challenges of military defeat, economic collapse, and political revolution.